Well, we are here with John from Gather Sciences, and we're super excited to have him here. The reason why we decided to do this together today is because, as you know, we talk about retention a lot. And retention is something so important right now because people are jumping jobs. We have, still 46% of people that are currently in roles in the United States are looking to get new roles within the next 12 months. And so we talk to our clients a lot about what are the levers to not only retain people but also attract new people. And so for those of you that have listened to us before, I talk about things like salary, of course, is a lever, and extra PTO is a lever, and things like making sure that you have great benefits that are health benefits is a lever. But one of the things we always talk about is that a flexible work location is a huge lever right now, especially since the pandemic. And so we decided to have this conversation with John because he's kind of an expert on hybrid work. And so a lot of times we have our CEOs tell us we would love to do hybrid, but we don't know how to do it well. Or, we're staying away from hybrid because people that stay home, they just don't work, they're playing video games. So we thought John could have a conversation with us just a little bit about how to be successful at hybrid. So tell us a little bit about the stats you see on, people that are wanting to, the people that are looking for jobs that want hybrid or off-site work, remote work, as well as what the employers are thinking right now, because it keeps changing.
It really does. And I think you mentioned it, you hit the nail right on the head, which is really, we view this as an emerging, maybe it's here, right, but an emerging employee benefit. So you'd see those all the time. 401ks and retirement plans and matching, those are all benefits we're used to seeing. Now, because some companies have moved back to full-time and are saying they're thinking about moving back to full-time, we're starting to see differentiation between companies. Some who are saying, hey, we're full-time in the office, others who are trying to continue to offer hybrid. So we do view it as an emerging sort of employee benefit. Now, that said, if we think about, well, why have some companies moved back? Clearly there's challenges. So our view is that if those companies that want to offer that as a benefit and want to continue to support hybrid can do it well so that it is not negatively impacting the business or those individuals in the business and their ability to grow and be successful, those are the companies that will really win in this game of hiring, especially if we hit another labor crunch and maybe with all this investment the US is seeing, all of a sudden there's another labor shortage. We believe those companies that are well positioned are going to be far ahead and be able to pick up great talent, whereas companies that have moved back full time are going to have significant challenges.
How many people that are out there looking for work are saying, I really want a hybrid job, or I really want a fully remote job?
Absolutely, yeah. So the numbers, they go in the low 80s. So we look at, often cite 2023, 2024 study, Zip and Cisco did one that are right there, about 83% prefer a hybrid option to that.
Okay, hybrid or hybrid/remote.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
To have that as an ability, meaning not having to come in full time to an office.
Yeah, interestingly enough, that means only 17%, if I'm doing the math correctly, right, is going to want
absolutely
an on-site 5-day a week
for
job.
Sure. And sometimes those are very personal reasons. I spoke to somebody just last night who's an attorney, and they were back full time. He said, I love going into the office because I have young kids at home.
Sure. Yeah.
So for him, he lived close to the office.
Right.
It was a place of quiet and of peace, and attorneys' offices are very nice, as
yes.
we know. So for him, it was like this oasis. So somewhere in those 17% are people who don't have a quiet, work environment at home, and maybe don't have much of a commute, and they love the office.
Exactly.
But
it's a definite minority.
It's a definite minority, and even there, I think there's some very situational, low commutes or low distraction situations that they really like the office for.
Okay, so looking at that stat that 83% or whatever want something other than on-site,
right.
I mean, we need to kind of focus on that, because in that 83%, there's probably, those is where our A players are. We, when we hire, we think about, and we talk to our clients, we think about, you can always hire the C and D players. Like, you don't even have to pay them a lot. You don't have to use any of the levers we talk about, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to use that. Sure. But if you want the A players, oftentimes you do need to provide them at least the hybrid option. One of the interesting stats that you and I talked about when we talked prior to this is that if our clients say we're fully on site and this person needs to be a fully on site, oftentimes we tell them that'll be about a 15 to 20% increase in pay. You have to pay them to do that. And their jaw drops to the ground and they're like, oh my gosh, how many days do I have to do hybrid in order to not pay that delta? And so it's interesting how that's kind of played out. Yes, I'll go on site, but you sure need to compensate me for that because the norm now is more hybrid. And so when we look at that, we think about, does that client really want to pay that extra 15 or 20%? And so then they go to us and go, well, I guess we could do hybrid, right? If we have to.
Right.
And when people come to you as a consultant on this, what kind of stages are they in? Are they in the, I've been hybrid for a while and it's not working, or I want to be hybrid, or we're trying to decide what to do? Like, when do they come to you?
I would say the majority, probably over 60%, maybe even 70%, are in the category of they're doing hybrid, but they have concerns about different aspects of what's happening. Those are most often around responsiveness concerns, some culture, certainly around onboarding. So new employees are not able to get up to speed as quickly, and it's having an impact on the business and its ability to be effective and productive. And then productivity is always one that you do see and hear about.
And do you feel like, we always, we use this book, and the people that kind of have followed us a little bit know that we use a book called It's the Manager. And we talk a lot about that the success or failure of people in retention and hire is kind of what the manager does, right? If we have a great manager that knows how to manage people, we usually see much more retention in that department or in that organization. Are you saying that that's the linchpin? Like, managers don't really know how to manage people that are hybrid, or do you think they're tools, or how do you attack that?
I certainly think that's a contributing factor. There's no question that is a way to do it. Although, if we just focus in on that management question, I think it's a fair question to ask if 5 years ago, those same managers were doing a great job of managing even when people were coming in 4 and 5 days. If an employee comes in and you're telling them what to do that day, I would argue that's probably not a great way to manage. It's a great Band-Aid because they're in front of you. You can say, oh, gee, I guess you don't have anything to do. Let me tell you what to do. But telling somebody what to do that day can't be the most efficient way to put somebody on the highest priority, project. So we do think it's that. We think there's also a gap in terms of that employers have left managers in a bit of a tough situation because there's a surprising number of companies that do not have a comprehensive and clear policy and set of guidelines around this. And so they're really not empowering those managers to really be able to effectively manage against anything. So you'll get people who want to switch days. Oh, well, I want to come in can I just come in a different in-office day? I know we're normally Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but I have this going on Wednesday, so could I swap my day and do Thursday? Really not realizing that it defeats the entire purpose of the team coming in together, as an example.
So people are, lack of policy, as we always see in HR.
Absolutely.
Lack of policy creates kind of a little confusion, and then everybody's like, I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just get rid of hybrid because we didn't manage it properly.
Yeah, this is an interesting area because you truly need a comprehensive policy. So for example, were you okay about work location? Are you okay if it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or let's say your team is in Tuesdays and Thursdays? Well, are you okay with somebody going off to the beach every Friday and working from the dining room table at the beach house? Like, is that okay? Well, maybe in some cases
should be
it's okay.
I'm just kidding. I do that, so I feel pretty good about that.
But maybe if a certain person in a certain role, and there's people walking in the background and they're in a customer service role, and they're going to be on a Zoom call or it's a sales call, is that the image the company wants to present? And so it's really thinking through those situations, but most importantly, sort of putting a why behind it so that they don't appear arbitrary.
And do you feel like sometimes they're not able to be successful hybrid because of systems issues? Like they don't have the right computer systems to do it, or they're not capturing enough data so that they're worried about, like, is that person sitting in their seat 8 hours a day?
I think less so. I mean, we've never been really a big fan of using mouse movement trackers and other things. We think if you're at that point, you've probably lost the battle.
Right.
And that you need to work upstream to ensure that there's effective ways to manage it other than activity. I mean, activity doesn't necessarily indicate anything good's going to come out of that activity, right? Versus being more planned. So, as it relates to technology, I would say it's not as much about connectivity. I think connectivity is pretty much was put in place the first 18 months of the pandemic,
Sure.
right? And companies have come a long way. Where I think a gap does exist is ensuring that individuals have a well-equipped, with technology and capabilities office at home. If somebody is just working on their laptop, there's plenty of studies that have shown you're not going to be as effective versus being set up with a multi-monitor, full keyboard, full mouse. You just won't. You won't get as much done. You can't see as much information at once. And so if somebody is set up really well at the office, but at home they're just sitting on the couch with a laptop for hours at a time, it's unlikely that individual is going to be as productive, at least as it relates to technology, as they would be in the office, depending on their tasks, of course, but as a general rule.
So tell me a little bit about, like, you come in and, you've been brought in to say, I've been doing hybrid as a company. We want to stay hybrid because we want to be competitive to get those A players in the workforce. We have the ability to do that because they're, we like to call them remote capable employees, because there are some employees we talked about right before this, if you have nurses that work for you, if you have, restaurants, many of your employees are not remotely capable, but we're just talking about remotely capable employees at this point. And so if I'm this company and I have remote capable workers and it's not been working great, so you get brought in, and what's the first thing you do with a company?
The first thing is really just try to understand what the current situation is. So we'll just understand, well, where are they at now from either a policy and how people are, is the policy being followed, not being followed? What are the challenges they're seeing? They usually, we wouldn't be talking to them typically if they haven't seen challenges.
Sure.
So we'll get an understanding of that. And then really, where do they want to go? Like, what is their goal? And sometimes we can talk to them about that or a different way to get there. But we'll really try to understand the current situation. It's also very helpful to understand where those senior leaders, so the functional area lead, so maybe your CMO and your CFO, your CHRO, where they sort of all sit on this topic. Because oftentimes across that executive leadership team, there's not alignment, right? So the CEO or managing partner might have one view of it, and then the others may say, well, yeah, they're just old school, or they just, without really understanding, well, what is driving that? Well, maybe it is, well, that's the way we used to do it and it used to work well, but let's get down to really the why of what problems you think are happening here. Sometimes it's perception, right? It can just be that there's not effective enough information getting up to the senior executive in terms of how productivity is tracked and reported on. So alignment across the executive team, or at least an understanding of non-alignment, just alignment is important.
That's usually so difficult,
right?
To make sure that they're aligned, especially when they run different parts of an organization. Where accounting, you can, in many cases those can be remote, but your marketing team generally likes to be in person.
Right.
So, it's just kind of all depends.
Absolutely. So in our overall framework, it's called balanced hybrid, and we've created this and refined over the last 2 years. And one of the key elements of it is really to say, we believe that those breaks in terms of hybrid structure exist much more naturally across functional areas of a business than similar types of businesses to different businesses. So instead of saying, well, all high tech, kind of runs this way, we think it's much more likely that your accounting and marketing and finance are going to run very similar to marketing, accounting, and finance at another company, even if it's a different industry.
Interesting.
And so, because if we think back 5, 6, 7 years ago, sales always operated differently than the rest of the company. And oftentimes, sales at a manufacturing company and sales at a high-tech company might operate very similar to each other, even though they're in totally different industries.
Right.
So we, in terms of the data we collect a lot of data, we bring a lot of data together, really for the purposes of helping them chart a path and create high-value, highly effective hybrid plans for each functional area of the business.
So they really can, we often say that kind of when we come in and do we did this thing called an HR audit, which is kind of it's actually called an assessment and roadmap, but it is an audit. But basically we come in and we look at small businesses and we say, okay, this is some things, red, yellow, green, with the red areas are the things that either are poorly in compliance, but oftentimes it's like, we've seen other companies and other small businesses utilize PTO better than you do to get employees and those kind of things. And so we're able to bring in all of our background from consulting with hundreds of companies to, give this company insight into what other companies are doing, which I always think is valuable. But I'm hearing that from you as well, that you're bringing in, from working with lots and lots of companies to a company that's trying to figure out hybrid, saying, okay, well, this is what has worked in many companies, so kind of bring in the consultative background where it's not just, because they can probably figure it out. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm, kind of being able to figure that out by myself, but having that knowledge that you have really will shorten that time to early adoption as well as success, I'm guessing.
Right, yeah, and we do a very similar type of assessment and understanding of where they're at. So some of that is, we talk about policy and guidelines. Are they established? Are they followed? Are they comprehensive? So there's those elements, and then there's also really, what are the characteristics of that approach, and is it one size fits all? How did they come up with it? Well, some consultant, I read an article and they were doing 3 days in, so we just decided to do that.
Yeah.
Well, what we found is it's not one size fits all, certainly not across companies, and then even within a company, we think there can be variability where it makes sense for a group or department, one versus another.
So, to kind of wrap up what we're talking about, what do we think that as you look over all the clients that you've actually done this with, what's a good example of one that, you don't have to use the proper name or anything, but that you've seen great success with, and what were they like before you came to them, and then what were you like after you left?
Yeah, we worked with a finance group of a publicly traded company, and it's an initial group to work with there, and it was very interesting because we went through the process and we really looked at, even within their group, because they obviously have a good number of people in it, and we worked through those plans. They determined that part of that finance team, what made sense for them was coming in 2 days a week, and then the last week of the month they would work from home, as an example, because what they needed, they were trying to close the books or close the quarter.
Yeah, smart.
And so what they needed is, because they're a seasoned team, so it wasn't a question of people need to ask a lot of questions. Their 2 requirements for that team was they needed as much time as possible, and they needed to be left alone to do that. And so guess what? Home was the best place, because that team had an average round trip commute of over 2 hours. And so you think about the number across 7 or 8 people on that part of that team. You multiply that out across 3 or 4 days that they might have otherwise come in, that was the best for them. Another group within that decided, hey, first week of the month is best for us because we have to do this related to it. So it went from I would say a homogenous sort of approach and not really understanding it, to saying, hey, when we come into the office, here are the activities we're going to prioritize, to ensure we're getting the most out of the time together. Here's what we're going to prioritize for our home time. And then really, I would say a great example of this is that the person we're working with, who's the corporate controller, he was talking with his boss, and we had just announced this entire new program, and his boss, was the CFO, came to him and said, hey, guess what? I just got out of the ELT meeting, and we're going to go to 3 days a week.
Oh, wow.
A couple months from then.
Yeah.
And so the executive we were working with, he said, no. He said, nope, we're not doing that. And he said, we've been through this whole process, been through the balanced hybrid process. We've thought about this very intently, about what we're going to do. We know why we're going to do it. And he said, if anyone comes to you and says, our team is not executing, or our team isn't responsive, or our quality is down, you have them come to me and I will sort it out. He said, but I am so confident that what we put together is the right thing for our group.
Love that.
That I'm going to hold the line on this. And his CFO said, okay. Now he also said, don't tell anybody else, which is not where we want to go, but it shows the progress, and what we really coined that as enthusiastic accountability that we got from that leader. So he was so confident in how they put that together,
Yeah.
and that his team was going to be on track about how they were going to execute at home, how they're going to execute in the office, that that he wasn't going to let anything drop. That he was confident. So we
I love
think
that. I feel
enthusiastic
like
accountability is what was needed, not
Yeah.
only from leaders, but from every individual employee.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like one of the things that I've heard is that, you really do need to have that great conversation with the people to say what makes it work. And it makes sense in an accounting office, you're going to have closing weeks and, where they have to, kind of be heads down. And so customizing those things so that when they are in the office, because we hear from candidates all the time, like it's not remote worthy. I mean, it's not on-site worthy.
Right.
So we need to create experiences and meetings and stuff so it's worthy of my commute.
Absolutely.
To go on site. So, it's interesting how it used to be, it's always worthy to go on site because you get a paycheck. And now we have to really prove to our A-level workers why it's worthy to be in the car and spend all that time commuting and dressing up and everything else. So I think that's what you did. You said, okay, we're looking at your job description. We're looking at how important it is to be a team, because I'm a huge fan of hybrid because I love the teams getting to see each other. I don't know. I mean, the statistics are that, if you are remote 5 days a week, you have 40% less employee engagement. I mean, those 100%. Are just the stats. So while I run a company that's 100% remote, I do think it's very difficult to run a company that way and to keep that glue. And so very important to have that hybrid approach and have that worthy. So love meeting you, love knowing what you do. Again, I value hybrid and I value people being able to put that in small businesses so much because it helps us to find them great candidates at a price they can afford, and A, players that'll stay at a location and not just jump ship because they're called in to be fully on site. So we love having you as a resource that we can bring into our employers who say, hey, I understand this is important, I don't know how to implement it. So
yeah, well, we'd love to help where we can. We're big fans of hybrid and we think it can be done really well, and so we can preserve all the great things that hybrid can bring to a business and to its employees. So
sounds great. Well,
thanks for having me.
You are welcome. And again, huge lever for us as we do retention and hire is making sure that that flexible work location is one of the things that we look at. And so as it relates to your entire strategy for retention and hire, this is just one place that you can focus some attention. So